Now, this week, a group of Tea Party organizers, pro-life organization leaders, and constitutional awareness advocates testified before Congress because they were ideologically profiled by a weaponized, taxpayer-funded entity of the United States government. Democrats and their allies in the media have been asking, so where's the Tea Party? Where'd the Tea Party go? What are they up to? We never see them anymore. Yeah, see, they were asking, just like that too, they were asking these questions while using the IRS as a boot on the neck of the movement. Now, the Tea Party was there. They were there all right. They were just busy being oppressed and trying to organize under the weight of that oppression. In St. Louis, where I'm from, we couldn't organize rallies unless we paid the penance of $1 million liability insurance policy and provided porta potties. We had to jump through 11,000 hoops or else the city would shut down our demonstrations, they promised. Once, the evening before a big rally, one insurance provider actually pulled our coverage and left us scrambling to find another. Yet, we dutifully followed the law because that's what we do. We follow the rules. We cross the T's. We dot the I's. We wring our hands over every filing, over every written admission, because we've grown to fear the very people we employ, whose salaries we pay, those public servants who are encouraged to resent us by an administration that knows little in the way of boundaries. I am tired of following the law when those in charge of enforcing said law have less respect for it than I do. Now, compare our treatment in St. Louis to what the Occupy movement there received. Only after pressure from city residents who were tired of being unable to use the park downtown because the occupiers turned it into a slum did the mayor finally act. And I offered them a free permit. Ow! And we were never offered free permits. In fact, we were told to clean up our trash or we would be fined. Several times the city offered them permits and the occupiers flew the city a one-finger salute. Now, only then, after embarrassment and further pressure from actual tax-paying citizens fed up with the increased crime and smell, did the mayor remove them from the park. And when they wouldn't leave of their own free will, they were arrested. And in turn, they vandalized the home of a St. Louis public safety director. Now, both the city and the local press, yours truly excluded, of course, were silent. Now, later that same year, they vandalized a historic park and its monuments during their Occupy meeting, at which they hosted fake Indian Ward Churchill as their keynote speaker. No arrests, no fines. This was the way the ball bounced across the country. Tea Party groups in Virginia were harassed both locally and nationally. It wasn't just Tea Party groups and pro-life groups and pro-marriage groups and pro-Israel groups and Jewish groups. It was any group that identified itself as being conservative or, heaven forbid, patriotic. In July 2012, Drew Ryan of Media Trackers, he filed for tax exemption status. It's a relatively easy decision, right? After waiting on the Cincinnati office, yeah, it's that one, for a year, Ryan realized that his group was never going to get its tax exemption application approved, so he applied for a permanent exemption status for a separate pre-existing group called Greenhouse Solutions. Now, that one was approved within 3 weeks. 500 groups, possibly more, targeted. And yet, according to Representative Jim McDermott, it's all our fault.
But as I listen to this discussion, I'd like to remind everyone what we're talking about here. None of your organizations were kept from organizing or silenced. We're talking about whether or not the American taxpayers will subsidize your work. We're talking about a tax break. If you didn't come in and ask for this tax break, you would have never had a question asked of you. You could go out there and say anything you want in the world. And I get the feeling that many of you and my Republican colleagues just don't believe, or you believe you should be free from political targeting, but that you should be free from any scrutiny at all.
Tax exemption, how does it work? Yes, Representative McDermott, Tea Partiers were just dressed too suggestively in our patriotic gear. We deserved what we got, right? Maybe our Gadsden flags were just a little too short. We were just asking for it, right? No means no, right, Representative McDermott? You want to hear something funny? Representative Jose Serrano asking for a bribe in the middle of all of this.
There are certainly efficiencies that can occur. The conference spending issue comes to mind. The IRS simply cannot sustain itself with this overall funding level. Although I am certain there are some who will view this as a good step, I disagree. There is no clearer way to promote more scandals than by cutting funding that could be used for oversight, training, and reform. At the level this subcommittee is funded right now, we are just asking for more trouble at the IRS and elsewhere.
2 + 2 = dolphin. That's hysterical, because $4.1 million for a conference in Anaheim isn't enough, apparently. The IRS targeted us because they just weren't getting enough money. They just got bored, I guess. Yes, it's our fault for following the law. It's our fault for trusting our bloated government and their partisan officials for the representation paid for by our taxation. Now, while Doug Shulman testified twice before Congress last year about this very issue, his wife, Susan Anderson, was busy tweeting away, encouraging the very tactics he denied were in practice at his job. Look at this. Karl Rove, Crossroads, get the money out. Now, I am not a Karl Rove fan, but Crossroads, that was one of the groups targeted. Let's see another one. Oh, there she was. She was an occupier, by the way. There she is down at one of the Occupy groups, Occupy DC. Tell your 99% story. She had a ton of different tweets. Threatens our republic, #OWS. And the interesting thing is, she even gets into Romney. Folks go to the Caymans to dodge taxes or dive reefs. Want to bet what Mitt was doing there? And while she was tweeting this, Doug Shulman was saying he didn't know anything about this before 2 different House subcommittees. Huh. Yeah, talking about Romney's tax returns. Do you remember how angry progressives were over Ginny Thomas simply because she was married to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas? Yeah. Today, we'll talk to some of these very individuals who were illegally persecuted by the very government entity they pay to support. Ginny Beth Martin of the Tea Party Patriots is in D.C. this week for the hearings. Her group helped spearhead the IRS protests across the country from just a couple of weeks ago. We'll talk to Catherine Engelbrecht, who, along with her group True the Vote, was both personally and professionally targeted by the IRS and other Soros-funded tax-exempt entities. Hers was one of the very first groups to file suit against the IRS. Tea Partiers and those fighting for voter integrity weren't the only ones targeted, however. When the media first decided to acknowledge the scandal that I, Glenn, and so many others have talked about for several years now, reporters started coming forward, members of the media, to confess that they, too, had been targeted because their coverage was just too tough. Their questions were just a little bit too hard. Todd Starnes is one of these. So, too, is Larry Connors, a veteran television broadcaster from St. Louis. He interviewed President Obama prior to his reelection, and he asked some tough but fair questions. He also did it of George W. Bush. His interview made headlines. Last month, after the IRS scandal finally broke, he made an observation to spur some discussion on Facebook. That resulted in his firing by his employer, CBS affiliate, KMOV Channel 4. Now, here's a fun fact. The parent company of KMOV Channel 4, the Belo Corporation, said goodbye to one of its directors, Luis Caldera, in 2008 when he went to work for the Obama administration. Another fun fact. I love fun facts. He was the guy blamed for dreaming up that Boeing 747 flyover that was so close to the Manhattan skyline, the entire city was thrown into a panic. Connor's situation helps to mark a turning point in media, one envisioned by journalism pioneer from my city, former St. Louis Post-Dispatch editor, the late Cole Campbell. Campbell was run out on a rail like Elijah Lovejoy for merely suggesting that the public be allowed into the newsroom. I mean, after all, isn't that what Connors did while relating his own troubles with the IRS? He just wondered aloud whether or not it was related to his tough interview. And what did the public think of this, he wondered. Here was his own personal experience. What do others take away from this scandal? Fortunately, KMOV didn't like allowing the public into the newsroom. especially while it was busy crafting a narrative. See, it's kind of hard to control a narrative when new media acts like a portal from the neighborhood to the newsroom. The story's no longer controllable. Discussion can't be contained anymore. See, Cole Campbell thought that journalism could be and is a community's practice. Connors went rogue. KMOV actually had to shut down its Facebook page to clear it of comments that were in support of Connors. See, their Facebook page is only a new media facade. After all of these years, Cole Campbell's reality of public journalism is most rejected in the very last city whose paper he edited. Our last guest for today would be celebrated by Campbell's standards of media evolution. Kelly Maher of RevealingPolitics.com is leading the fight for Colorado's soul. Since Democrats triggered that two-election blueprint of shifting an iconic Western state from red to blue, Maher has waged war with state lawmakers, helping to defeat the ban on legally concealed firearms on college campuses. She's here to talk new media and to give a warning. What happened in Colorado can happen in Texas, where the next target is fixed.